Hi and welcome to jetNEXUS tutorials for fast, scalable and resilient applications. This tutorial is on pre-authentication and single sign-on, where I'll talk to you about where jetNEXUS sits in the network, what pre-authentication provides, the advantages of single sign-on, and then how we configure it. So let me talk to you about jetNEXUS itself. We sit in a pretty privileged part of the network in between clients and applications, and that allows us to restrict those clients' access to those applications and act as a secure doorway and a central point of administration to prevent unauthenticated and untrusted traffic and protect that internal resource, particularly from external clients. And then with the advent of single sign-on, we can improve end-user experience, allowing them to sign on only once to gain access to multiple applications. So how do we do that? Well, we've made it a four-step process where we add an authentication source in step 1, and in step 2 we create an authentication rule to use that source. And here we can set parameters such as what the client is presented with, and that could be a standard 401 browser pop-up, which is just a username and password, or we can add a custom form that has your own logo on there with your custom message, and there's a default one on the jetNEXUS one you can use, which you can set a custom message to. And we can also set the back-end parameters of the server, so whether the server expects authentication too. And then in step 3 we tie those previous two steps together with our traffic manipulation engine rule in flight path, so we can set various conditions and then action the authentication rule. So one of the conditions may be that the host does equal a particular host name, so it only fires for a particular application on a particular host name. Another one could be you could set an external subnet to authenticate, but any internal subnets won't authenticate. And then to tie that all together to your service or to many services, then we apply that flight path rule across those services. So why don't I show you how we do that on the load balancer itself. Okay, so let's follow our four-step program to configure pre-authentication. First of all, we need to check whether we have a license for authentication. So my license tab is open here already, but I'll show you where to get that. That's from the system license section. We click on license and we see that pre-authentication, we've got a permanent license, so we continue. And what that allows us to do is access then the contents of the library of authentication page, which I've got open already. And we can see here we've got step 1. So step 1 is configure our source. So here we give it a name, we choose our authentication method, and more methods will be available in future releases. We give it your domain and your IP address, the port for the particular authentication method, and you can choose what login format you want. So username only means I only have to enter gchristie instead of gchristie@jetnexus.com. So step 2 would be to tie this server, so this name here, to a rule. And we can do that in the authentication rules section. So we can see we've given it a name. This is just rule 1. We're not using a root domain. If we wanted to do single sign-on as below, then we use a root domain. I'll explain that a bit later. We can set the authentication server. So this is we tie into the step 1. This is a drop down. So if we look at the available server options, we can see that the two of the sources that we've added are available. We can also set the client side, what happens to the client. So we block the client from accessing the server and we present them with a particular form. And that form is dictated by the form column here. So we can either choose from the default one that jetNEXUS offers, or we've added a custom one. So we're just going to use the default one at the moment. And that form, that custom one, can be added in the section below. On the server side, your servers might be expecting some authentication of their own. Ours are not, so we set it to none, but we can also deal with basic authentication on the server side and NTLM on the server side, and in future versions we'll be dealing with Kerberos too. Then we can give it a message, so just to indicate what rule we've got in our instance for demo purposes, and then we can set a timeout, and this timeout is an inactivity timeout for your client. So if they log in first thing in the morning and then don't do anything else with that application, 60 seconds later they'll be asked to log in again. Obviously that's a short time, and we would set that to a longer time or indefinite on a real server. So next we go to step 3, where we create a flight path rule. So from the library of flight path, we then open up this tab, and here we've got 2 rules pre-created and they're already tied to our services. So we've tied rule number 1 to service 1 and 2, and rule number 2 to service 3 and 4. And each rule is made up of a condition or a set of conditions and an action. And here we've got the action is authenticate, but our conditions we've set host does contain app.com and the source IP doesn't match regular expression, doesn't match this subnet. So we can take for this instance that that's a local subnet. And what do? We authenticate. So again, these are drop downs, so we can look at what else we can do, but we're only interested in authenticate for this one. And then we choose the rule we want to authenticate with. So that's how we create the flight path rule. Now we need to apply it. We go back to IP services and then we apply those rules. So we've applied rule 1 to services 1 and 2, and then we've applied the SSO rule to services 3 and 4. So let me show you what that means in practice. Okay, so let's see those rules in action. I have a couple of websites here, so firstapp.com and secondapp.com. The first just means it goes to the first service, and this doesn't have SSO on it, so we should be expected to sign into both. And if we click refresh on here or Control Shift R to reload, and then all we need to do is sign into one and then see if we have to sign into the other. So if we do Control Shift reload again, we still have to sign into that second one. So there's pre-authentication without single sign-on, where you have to sign into every single application. Now if you have multiple applications, that can be a little bit of a pain for the user and not a great end user experience. So what we can do is use SSO, and this is where if we specify the root domain sso.com within our rule, then that's all we need to do to enable SSO. So anything else, we've got third sso.com, fourth sso.com. Both of these are part of the root domain SSO. So we'll be able to use the credentials from signing into one to sign into the other. So if we sign into fourth.sso, for example, we get this web page, and if we don't have to sign into third now, we can just click refresh and it will sign in automatically. So there's single sign-on happening in action. So these first two, you had to sign into both of them, and that might be exactly what you need for your environment. But if you don't and you want a better end user experience, then you can use SSO and it will sign you into both. Okay, thanks for watching. Please take some time to look at the other videos that we've got on our YouTube and website, and don't forget you can obtain your free trial from the links detailed below.